Hello, everyone. My name is Chad Erickson, and I'm the Vice President of Strategy at MyAdvice, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to our podcast today. Joining me today is Justin Marti. Justin is, I think I have to say, managing partner because it's a law firm, right? We don't say CEO, but he's the founder and creator of the Marti Law Group, and Justin's story is phenomenal. If you don't know him, you're going to get to know him today, and you're going to learn a lot about the legal side involved in really the selling of practices. And we're going to talk about those and some of the downsides, some of the upsides, some of the things to be aware of, because there's so many options, and you hear so many different stories, around there today. So you're going to learn a lot from our podcast today. I'm really, really excited. Justin is an expert in a lot of ways. I'm going to give just a little bit. So Justin has a very, very unique background. Justin comes from being first a practice owner. He bought practices. I'm going to let him tell his story because it's phenomenal, and then got into the legal side. And so it's actually remarkable. So Justin, why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself and how you kind of got started in this space? Because I think it lends a lot of credibility to who you are and the knowledge and expertise that you bring to the marketplace.
Yeah, thanks again for having me,
Absolutely.
Chad. I'm still sometimes questioning the decision to get into the legal side, but no, it's been a wild journey, and I apologize to repeat the story, but I am truly like the accidental attorney, I guess, if there is one. And so, like you said, going back a number of years, late 2000s, I was in Boston and in kind of a sales role and working with dentists and physicians. And I ended up partnering or getting approached by a dentist to partner and open up dental practices, and what we now know as a DSO, although at the time I was not familiar with the term. So we started opening locations de novo all across the Northeast. And after a good, 10, 12-year run, we had a handful of partners, and we ended up with about 40 some odd locations, and we went through a PE exit, and it was a wild ride. And for some reason, I had this desire to go to law school at night during that time, really with no intention of practicing law. Like, I guess my brain needed some sort of additional stress. We didn't have enough, and so started going to law school with this focus on transactions and kind of really just business type of law and healthcare, of course. And so we exited, and the phone starts ringing with doctors who maybe had worked for our organization and now wanted to buy their practice or sell something. So it kind of was a seamless transition to hop into M&A, and with that comes some compliance, employment agreements, associate agreements, but really just dive deep into dental and a couple other healthcare verticals.
Really, really fascinating. So you go through all this. You're like, oh my gosh. So tell us about you sold those, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So there's got to be some stories there that are going to really lend to some things I want to talk about today and some of these topics. But as we talk about, you talk about the hiring and sort of the challenges with practices and different things. You've faced those personally, and now you see them on the law side because you're consulting and you're advising these practices all the time. So, what do you think are the top challenges that are facing practice owners today that they're just struggling with? That you're like, oh my gosh, I wish I could go back and dump all this knowledge on you. In some cases you are, but what would you be able to tell your younger self, and what are these challenges today that are out there?
It's such a great question. And you're right. I think we do, I guess I bring a pretty unique view to the lawyering side that we do now, because I've literally been in the driver's seat of I haven't placed implants, but I've done everything else, in a practice. And I didn't shoot Botox, but really helped, whether it's a med spa, dental practice, help. I think we have a very different understanding of running a practice, and we take that into our lawyering, and talking with doctors beyond just the black and white of a contract. It was an interesting journey, where we had all de novo locations. I think practice owners still can certainly do de novos. We see them all the time, startups. we see people doing those. Obviously, there's a lot of acquisition today, of course, like we've talked about before, consolidation. Um, so some of the challenges, I think, if you're on the acquisition side, is just making sure you do your homework to find a proper target. And it sounds like almost a little obvious, but I think just like buying a house, people really need to define their parameters in advance rather than just going out
Right.
and finding the shiniest thing or something that could make sense. Some people really want to, find a turnaround, right? An opportunity to get into a practice that might not be running that well and make improvements. Others might be a little turned off by that. So I think define your parameters again, just like a house. How many bedrooms? What neighborhood do you want to be in? What's the price point? And then you can kind of back in, almost like your avatar, like back into, okay, these are the practices in front of me. This one fits the model I'm going for. This one doesn't. I'd say the second kind of consideration or challenge is battling DSOs if you're on the acquisition side, as a sole provider, sole practice owner, or hoping to be so. If you're getting into like a $200 million revenue, actually DSOs and MSOs, if you're in kind of a $2 million revenue, 500,000 plus EBITDA, you're going to start to have to go against, the big folks, right? Probably for some of these targets from some of these practices. So that's okay. It doesn't mean that there's plenty of doctors we work with and providers who don't want to sell to, maybe a DSO or an MSO. So there may be an opportunity to get in there, but it's just, the reality is that a lot of these stronger practices are, being solicited every day by these, PE-backed organizations. And then I'd say like kind of on the startup side, really on both sides is the lease. So we've talked about, I'm telling you, every landlord out there is going to hate me after this, but the lease negotiations can truly be really difficult. We talked previously about kind of being a deal killer. So whether it's a startup, de novo, you're going in there, it's a tough spot because if you're a practice owner or hoping to be, you don't have a whole lot of financial maybe behind you to prove how strong you are as a tenant. Or if you're taking over a lease and you're doing an M&A deal, you got to come in and you need this landlord to kind of agree so that you can solidify transactions. So I think the lease part often gets overlooked as to how tough it can be. And so that gives a little bit of, acquisition side as well as startup.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. So the lease side, they're getting bombarded all the time. So it's, a lot of different challenges, but the opportunities I think can't be overlooked as well, right? And so let's talk about that a little bit on some of these opportunities. How does a practice set themselves up for success in today's market? Maybe I'm looking for the word differentiation, but thinking about the increase of competition that's in the market, but also I think we talk about some of the concerns in the economy, right? We've been hearing, certainly inflation has been real. We hear about recessions and it's unknown. It seems like, it's an election year, so things typically stabilize in election years because nobody wants to be the bad guy in an election year. That's normal. Doesn't matter who it is, right? And so this year could be a little bit of an anomaly, but we don't know. So it's interesting. It's there's some things out there that say, hey, we could be doing well, and kind of things are turning around. Interest rates could be coming down. Others are saying, no, just buckle up. It's a slight correction, and it could get worse. So I think there's some fears that are in the marketplace. So with that though, let's talk about setting up for success in today's market, so that whether someone's selling today or looking to acquire additional practices, what do you need to be doing? What should they be looking at? How are they going to maximize the best EBITDA, revenues, etc.?
I feel like I'm always on my soapbox, preaching to people about build your team, build your team, your financial people, your legal team, your marketing team, right? Like people start cutting back, as we know, in certain environments, and sometimes it's the last thing you should be cutting is
Right.
you need to build that presence where, like you talked about, you might be in a saturated market. You need to be really strategic with how you're spending your pennies. And so I think that is so often overlooked. But I think just building that team, again, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, doing your diligence. So if you're acquiring, certainly you're going to evaluate the past reports and the practice management data and the P&L. but I would make some pro forma projections of, okay, what if things slow down a bit, and my margin's not as big? Can I be okay with that? Certainly, we hope you get the opposite, but I always tell folks, the unfortunate job of a lawyer a lot of times is let's prepare for the worst, hope for the best. And so I think that's super important to build out the risk tolerance, I guess. And then something we do on our end is, if someone's acquiring a practice, is a pretty deep dive, like a lean, what we call a lien and litigation search. And we'll bring in usually a third party to do a little digging for dirt on the target practice. Again, just like buying a house, do they have a mortgage? Do they have loans they need to pay off? But beyond that, are there malpractice things we should be worried about, or pending insurance claims? So we want to make sure there's something called successor liability, and we want to make sure our buyers don't have that, whereas you actually can inherit some of these things. So I think that's really important, again, on the buy or the startup side. And again, on the exit side, a lot of the same principles apply. It's kind of just now the opposite lens, get your house in order. If you have these outstanding debts or potential liabilities, try to shore things up before you go to market to make yourself as attractive as possible.
That's great suggestions. And we run our business in a similar way to what you just described. As we do our forecasting and our budgeting for a new year, we're looking at hey, if we hit all of our goals, we think we're going to be at this percentage of growth in the year, right? And then what happens if we only achieve this? And worst case scenario, we have flat growth. What does that look like? And within those scenarios, we have to think about, okay, so what would the budget cost cuts need to be, right? Is it what overhead? Is it people? Is it maybe trade shows? Well, what are things that, and then looking at every expense and thinking about every single group as a profit center.
Right.
Is that individual, that team member helping me be more profitable? If I go to this conference, is it because it's going to help me be better? So we have to look at those things as well on our own end. And so I think it's really good to think about those and think about various scenarios. But it involves some planning and some thinking and being a little strategic about who you are, and not just, all right, hey, 2024, let's give it the old, I think that a 4.5% increase this year would be awesome, right? Let's think about realistically what makes sense, and just get strategic about it and thinking about those opportunities.
Which kind of sadly, so many business owners, not just practice owners, but business owners do, right? We all get so busy. Totally. We're like, okay, I've been guilty of it plenty of times in my career where it's like, I got to get to the budget. Next thing I know, it's like March, and we're like, we didn't do our budgeting, quite properly. So, so important that they do planning on both sides. And I think you're right. You've got to really be strategic. And what's your budget? Stick to it. Trade shows can be fun, and shiny, new equipment can be fun, but it's really got to have that ROI we need.
Totally. I think that's, I think you nailed it, is where's the ROI going to come from? And is it going to be there in the way that you think? And do you have a game plan to execute on it? So
absolutely.
It makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you this, in your expert opinions, we're talking about this, and this is one of those questions that is, it's a little, we'll see. Let me just ask you this question. So putting your crystal ball in place, Justin.
Yes.
Where is this consolidation market headed over the next 3 to 5 years, in your expert opinion?
Man, if we had a crystal ball to predict this, we would be, probably not working the day job. You probably hear as well. I hear these wildly different opinions of where things are. I've heard the doomsday opinions of, there's 3 years left of consolidation and that's it,
Yep.
And I really cannot agree with that. And then, there's other folks that say there's this long runway. And frankly, I think, there's a lot of DSOs and there's, MSOs that are buying practices up, and they have been for a number of years, but we've still got, however many dentists graduating each year and folks retiring each year. And, there's plenty of practices, like I talked about, that I think are just too small, maybe for a large PE-backed buyer.
Yep.
Maybe they don't have the service mix they want. So, in my point being, I think there is from a percentage standpoint, I can't even put a number on it, but I think there's a lot of opportunity for folks to still go out, buy practices, or start practices and
Yes.
have, a great opportunity where I think there is this doomsday view a lot of times that, where the clock is ticking on the industry.
I hear that as well, and I couldn't agree with you more. I don't see it ending. I don't see that it's going to go away. I don't think it's some bubble that's going to burst. But I also think that as a new practice coming in, can you be successful not joining one of those and doing your own thing? And the answer is yes. I think that what you're going to see is a smarter provider that's going to come out and be hyper focused and say, okay, maybe I don't purchase a device until this date, or I'm buying a device on a second-hand market, right? Where I'm going to save some money. Maybe I don't have some of the warranties and whatever, right? But they're going to say, I have enough support, and this is so. Can I cut? How do I cut costs, and how do I get where I need to be? They're going to think about, just there's a lot of money that's out there, and there's a lot of different ways to fund things. You can get debt financing, and so if you're saying, "Hey, I want to go out and I want to go out and I want to be the acquirer," great. I was talking to a good friend of mine on the dental side. He has a tremendous model right now where he's showing doctors how they can open up their own facility. This is a dentist, by the way, 600 square feet. That's all they need. He's like, we have created these massive spaces that we don't really need. He's like, think about it. All you really need, if you're going to be successful, is a room for the dentist and one for the hygienist. And how do you maximize the hygienist? And how do I maximize my time on the things that I'm doing, whether it's clear aligners, all on four, dental implants, things that are major money makers, right? And saying, we don't need to have all these extra rooms. We've thought about that. Boy, I need to go into these shared, medical offices, and I need to have this, 3,000 square feet space. And it's like, no, you really don't. If you really break it down to what you really need to be successful, this is a different model. And all of a sudden, what if you could reduce your cost on your lease by 2/3 or by 70%, right? Isn't that a huge savings? And then you're like, great. So now you go replicate that kind of a model. So there's opportunities. I just think we have to think about things differently than it's been done before. And I think there's a little bit of that growth mindset has to come in. If we go out and just do things the way that's always been done, we're going to struggle, and you're going to see those challenges. And so, anyway, I think there's lots of ways around it. I'm with you. I think it's going to keep expanding. But again, it doesn't mean there are not opportunities for small groups to come and start, be successful, compete in a market, and create their own niche. And who knows? So it's there.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you this as well. So you brought this up, and I think it's a really, really valid point. So maybe there are some, we've talked a lot about sort of the startup and the acquisition side. The sales side is also part of this, and selling can look a lot of different ways. Why don't you talk about what selling can look like and sort of the different models that you see out there in both the DSO and MSO world. Mm-hmm. And then let's talk about what you brought up earlier, which is these practices are getting contacted weekly, at least weekly, often daily. Someone's trying to give them some sort of an offer, right? And how do you vet out these different groups? How do you what are the, and I think sometimes I don't even know what questions to ask. I'm the owner. What should I be asking them? How do I vet the right group that's going to be the right fit for me if I am looking to go, and what are the options that are out there? So let's talk about the options, and then what are some of those questions to ask?
Sure, a great question again. So the options, I guess there's a few, right? There's certainly the obvious ones of I'm getting approached by an MSO or a DSO, to sell my dental practice or my cosmetic surgery, whatever practice they've got, and I can sell to this PE-backed group and kind of go from practice owner to employee, right? With obviously some perks there. And then alternatively, there's kind of that provider to provider transaction, or sometimes folks call it a private sale, where, I'm one doctor and, looking to sell to this other doctor here. And then, of course, there's kind of this third option where maybe you have an associate or a colleague in the practice, a junior provider who, you want to bring them in and they're kind of the heir to the throne. So what's that buyout or, buy-in structure look like for them? So those are the kind of the three buckets that we see people in and we're, navigating clients through. And I tell folks there's no right or wrong. It's kind of dependent upon what they're looking for. I think the most obvious situation is the provider or any business owners, right? Is like, okay, well, where am I getting the most money? And, of course, we all need to keep that in mind as they're looking to retire. Finances these days are getting tougher and tougher, like we've talked about. And I try to reel in our client, if we're on the sell side, a little bit and ask them to take more of a holistic view. And of course, let's consider the price. But again, what do the parameters of the transaction look like? How are they valuing the practice? What are they expecting of it? They're probably going to give you some cash at close, which is great. They're going to probably tie an earn out to it. Now, this is a more of a private equity buyer.
Sure.
Tie an earn out to it, right? So you're going to have to perform. They're going to want you to sign an employment agreement. They're going to, and stick around. It's probably upwards of 5 years. So if you're really at the tail end of your profession, are you okay with that? Are you okay sticking around for 5 or 6 years? And again, being really more of an employee. There's all shots.
Sure.
Sizes and shapes of MSOs, DSOs. Some are more invasive. Some are very much like, doc, do your thing, and if you hit numbers, we're happy. But it's a different kind of feel for the provider. So I really ask them to think about their goals. Think about just a little bit beyond like the money, because some organizations will dangle huge dollars, but you have to perform to get there.
Right.
And then, of course, there's this equity component with the private equity folks that they will give you equity in an organization, which can be very valuable. But the hope is, of course, they're going to go and sell and recapitalize, as we say, right? And so if you feel good about the buyer and you want the equity in that company, great. If you're a little concerned that this company may not have the longevity, you've got to weigh, like, do I want the equity? Do I fight, for more cash at close? And then, of course, on a private buyer sale, it's kind of a lot of the same considerations. It's just probably a shorter duration, and there might not be an equity role, but it's more just, hey, what does life look like post transition? Do I need to stick around and groom this provider, or does we close and the guy wants me out the next day?
Right.
And so these are considerations that I just think people have to look beyond when they're getting these offers coming in. And it's tricky. I mean, brokers do play a really important role. There's a reason people pay brokers a decent amount of money to kind of shop their practice around. And so when these unsolicited offers come in and you may not be working with a broker, you just you want to be thinking through these things.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. You talked about building a team. You need it on the legal side, which is what you bring in. You need the financial side. You need the marketing side. And I love that you brought in a broker as well. And there's going to be some that say, well, I can do this on my own, right? I don't need it. I'm going to negotiate. You might be right. But is that where you want to spend your time? Are you better off spending a little bit? It's not going to be, crazy sums, but you spend enough with the right broker, the amount of time they save you and their ability to negotiate a better deal is actually going to probably pay for itself and then some over what you're paying them. And that's the point. So let the experts do what they do and let them be your guide. I think that's a little bit of a takeaway for our group today is what you know, trust your team to lead you and hold you by the hand and help you be successful.
Absolutely.
I agree more.
Absolutely.
Now you brought some great points, Justin, and I really appreciate. Really appreciate it. And I know our audience listening today and watching this is going to really love and the information that's been shared. Your approach is unique. Again, as we mentioned, you've been on the side of buying practices, starting your own, being involved in that, eventually selling it. Talk a little bit about, because I think it's always good to have a personal story. What was and obviously you don't need to give away anything that's proprietary, but tell us about some of the thought process that went into selling your own group of practices, and because I think it's important that relating What did you see? What were you looking for? And I think maybe they can relate to that. And what's maybe one thing you're like, if I could go back, I would have done this differently.
Yeah. Probably the greatest question I could get asked is exactly that right there. And I think, man, you learn so much over the course of life and business and like looking back, hindsight, being 2020. And I think, we built something really cool. And not that I'm saying it could have been way better, but I think having implemented certain systems earlier, and even, I'm big on systems now. My team kind of makes fun of me because I'm always like, oh, let's think about our systems. But I'm big on that. But I think I do preach a lot to folks now about having an eye towards the exit. Like when we started this thing, our old, the DSO, I was young. I wasn't really thinking about kind of what's the exit look like. And as we grew this thing, we started to make decisions, planning for an exit. But I think we probably could have done even better if we really did that from the beginning, and had certain things systematized and had certain objectives and goals laid out for ourselves early on. So, you can pivot and you can certainly make changes at any point in time. I think at a minimum, starting to think, hey, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, I'm going to get ready to exit. We get called from clients who, unfortunately, I don't want to say they waited too long, but there's an injury and the doctor can't practice. And it's like a really, we actually have a deal like that right now. And it's sad, because they've built this really cool thing, but they're kind of getting dinged because of a situation they can't control. So again, looking back, I think really planning properly, and I keep harping on that, building your team. I didn't really look for a team. We didn't really look for a team until we started to get to the finish line. I can say we grossly overpaid in legal fees and diligence because we were kind of a mess, in certain areas. Like you just focus on your business and you're not thinking, well, what's our structure look like? Now I look at that way. But I think having an eye towards like a true exit. And now, I think a lot of discussions I have with clients there's certainly a lot of legal that we talk about, but it's more just kind of practical stuff too, of like, hey, like let's think about the exit. Let's think about life afterwards. Are you going to be good? Let's get with your financial advisor and let us work on your legal structure. If folks need to put together a DSO or an MSO structure, like let's do it in advance rather than waiting till, the day of the closing. And now we're trying to like
Totally
put crazy things together.
So a lot of planning and a lot of systems. I hope that the audience is listening to what you're saying today, because you're sharing some incredible nuggets. And again, coming from a place of being a little vulnerable and sharing, boy, shoulda, coulda, wouldas. And of course, you were still very successful. And I congratulate you on that. And I know our audience can learn a lot from you. But I think that there's a lot to take away from what we've been discussing today. You are phenomenal, Justin. Thank you so much. You're always inspiring. You bring so much, such a wealth of knowledge to everything that we do. So thank you so much. We got your information. We'll put it up here on the screen, but let everybody know how they can contact you if they're looking to say, where do I go? They're looking to talk to you and maybe get some advice on this side of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. So Marti Law Group, just spelled out, MARTI Law Group is our firm. And we operate on a little bit of a different model, I guess, shameless plug here. We really work on a very flat fee model. We have a membership model that's been pretty cool for a lot of folks buying practices, scaling, and they need help along the way. So that's kind of all on our website. We're happy to talk through people during a consultation. Phone number is there, but shoot me an email, Justin at Marti Law Group, or hit the website, and we're on the socials as well. You can probably find us there also.
Awesome. Justin, again, thank you. Always a pleasure. And to our audience watching and listening today, thank you for joining us. Always wonderful to have you here with us. Until our next podcast, we wish all of you the very best. Take care, everybody.